My son did not show up at my wife's funeral. Let me be clear, the woman who gave birth to him. 3 hours later, he posted photos of himself sunbathing and drinking wine on an island in California with his wife, with the caption, "Enjoy life while we still can." I stood alone in Rosewood Cemetery. The scrape of a shovel hitting the oak coffin echoed through the air. That was the sound of an ending. My wife Margaret lay there. Our only son should have been standing beside me. But the front row seat was empty, a cruel and gaping void. I looked at the screen of my phone. Luke's photo glowed under bright golden sunlight. He was smiling beside an expensive cocktail. He looked completely free while I was frozen among the graves. A current ran down my spine. It was not just anger. It was the collapse of a faith that had lasted 30 years. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a glass of water, a few snacks, sit comfortably, and remember this. The people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They simply chose not to. Leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe so you can follow this story to the very end. I was about to throw the phone into the pile of freshly dug dirt, but at that moment it vibrated. A new message notification appeared. The name of the sender made my breath catch in my throat. Margaret. My mind spun. I had closed her eyes with my own hands 3 days earlier. My heart pounded wildly as I stared at the words appearing on the screen. That was when I received a message from my wife. "My love, come home right now." Panic shot through me. Margaret was dead. I was standing there, throwing the final handfuls of dirt onto her coffin. The entire cemetery suddenly fell into an eerie silence. Only the wind whistled through the old cypress trees. This could not be some cruel joke. Only Margaret and I knew the password to that account. I staggered toward my car. My old legs trembled, but my mind felt strangely sharp. There was something Margaret had not managed to tell me. A secret she had taken to the grave. Yet now it was rising back to the surface. I had to go home, right now. What I did not know was that behind the door of that familiar house, a betrayal more naked and cruel than death itself was waiting for me. Everything was only just beginning, and the truth about my devoted son was about to come into the light. After saying goodbye to my wife in the cold cemetery, I drove like a man without a soul. The familiar road home suddenly felt endless. The image of Luke laughing on the beach kept flashing before my eyes. It blended painfully with my memories of Margaret during her final days. I remembered the hospital room, thick with the smell of disinfectant. Margaret lay there painfully thin, barely a shadow of the woman she once was. Every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, her eyes would light up with hope. She asked me only one question. "Is Luke coming?" I had to lie. I told her Luke was busy with a big project. I told her he had sent his love. But the truth was very different. I had called him dozens of times. He never answered. I texted him that his mother was dying. He replied with nothing but a short emoji. Eventually, the long road brought me home. I stepped inside, and silence swallowed the entire house. I sat down on the sofa where Margaret used to sit and knit. I opened Instagram again. This time I looked more closely at Luke's post. The photo had been uploaded only 35 minutes after we lowered Margaret into the ground. 35 minutes. While I was standing at my wife's grave, unable to cry anymore. He was raising a glass to celebrate his vacation. His friends had left hundreds of comments. "Awesome, Luke. Enjoy it, man. Living the dream." None of them knew his mother had just been buried. I could not tell if he was celebrating a vacation or celebrating the fact that his mother was gone. If you are listening to this story and you feel the same anger rising in your chest, leave a 1 in the comments. Sometimes, the pain of a family's betrayal is almost too heavy to carry alone. Something inside my chest shattered. It was not my heart breaking. My heart had already broken at the cemetery. What snapped was the final thread that still connected me to my son. I remembered Luke when he was 5 years old. He once cried uncontrollably when Margaret cut her finger in the kitchen. Now he was smiling on a beach while his parents' world collapsed. Cruelty like this does not appear by accident. It grows slowly like rot inside a beam of wood. I began asking myself where I had failed. Had we spoiled him too much? Or had the decay always been there, hidden deep inside him? I looked around the house. Everything was exactly the same. The furniture, the photographs, the quiet walls. But the warmth was gone. All that remained was the cold echo of betrayal. Luke had not only missed the funeral, He had been absent from his mother's life when she needed him the most. I looked down at my phone again. The message from Margaret's account was still there. "My love, come home right now." I stood up slowly and walked toward the kitchen. I did not know what I was searching for, but I knew Margaret never did anything without a reason. She had prepared for this day. She knew something I did not. My hands trembled as I opened the kitchen drawer. My eyes stopped on a large brown envelope lying neatly beneath a stack of old bills. Margaret's handwriting was on the front. The words were written quickly but firmly. "For Ethan. Do not open until I am gone." My hands began to shake violently. Luke's cruel betrayal was only the surface. Something far more terrifying was waiting inside that envelope, and whatever truth it held was about to change my life forever. I stood frozen in the silent kitchen. The manila envelope lay in my hands heavy, as if it carried a stone inside it. Margaret's handwriting stared back at me. Those same delicate strokes that used to write grocery lists were now delivering a message from beyond the grave. I took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. Inside was not a final love letter. It was a stack of bank documents and a business card. Sarah Chen, private investigator. Why would Margaret need a private investigator? I began reading the copied bank statements. The numbers started swimming in front of my eyes. A large sum of money had disappeared. $47,000. The money Margaret and I had saved over a lifetime for our retirement. It had been withdrawn slowly in small amounts over the past 6 months. My heart began pounding. I turned to the next page. Photographs. Surveillance. Photos. Luke standing outside a luxury watch store. Luke stepping out of a brand new sports car. The timestamps matched the exact days Margaret had been fighting through brutal chemotherapy treatments. Margaret had known. She knew Luke had stolen $47,000 from our retirement account to fund his lifestyle. She had secretly hired a private investigator, because she did not want to ruin Ethan's final months with anger and confrontation. Tears blurred my vision. Not because of the money, because of my wife's quiet suffering. She carried that pain alone. She watched the son she had given birth to slowly drain the life out of her. And still, she stayed silent. She smiled at me every morning as if nothing was wrong. She was trying to protect me from the truth until her final breath. At the bottom of the envelope, I found a small black voice recorder. Cheap. Old. My hands trembled as I pressed play. A faint hiss filled the kitchen. Then Margaret's voice came through the speaker. Weak. Fragile. But filled with heartbreak. "I know what you did, Luke." A second voice answered immediately. Luke's. There was no guilt in it. No hesitation. His voice was cold. I heard him say to his wife behind him, "It will not be long now. When she is gone, we inherit everything." The recorder slipped from my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. The crack of plastic sounded exactly like something breaking inside my chest. He had not only stolen from us. He had been counting down the days until his mother died. To him, Margaret's death was an investment opportunity. My grief was nothing more than a financial bonus. I collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor. Darkness slowly filled the room as evening settled outside. But inside me, something else was igniting. A fire, dark, cold, focused. Margaret wanted me to come home and find this. She wanted me to see the truth with my own eyes. She wanted the illusion of Luke's goodness to finally die. Luke would come home. Of course he would. He would return to claim what he believed was his inheritance. He would walk through that door wearing the same charming smile. But this time I was ready. I was no longer the blind old father he thought I was. The punishment was about to begin, and it would hurt far more than losing money ever could. I picked up my phone and dialed the number printed on Sarah Chen's card. What I had found in that envelope was only the beginning. Now I needed the full truth. I sat motionless in the darkness of the kitchen. The small black voice recorder lay on the table like a sleeping monster. My hand trembled as I pressed the play button again. I needed to hear it one more time. I needed to be certain my ears had not betrayed me. The tape crackled softly. The sound was like wind scraping through teeth. Then Margaret's voice came through. She was breathing heavily. A dry cough cut through her words. "I know you took that money, Luke. Why would you do that? I need that money for the next treatment." A long silence followed. My chest tightened. Then Luke's voice appeared. There was no fear in it. No hesitation. He sounded irritated, like someone forced to speak with an inconvenient stranger. "Mom, you are old. Even if you spend that money, you will not live much longer. I need it for an investment. I need a real life." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. His cruelty was far worse than anything I had imagined. But that was not all. Footsteps moved back and forth across the wooden floor in the recording. Luke was speaking to his wife now. His voice dropped lower, filled with calculation. "It will not be long now. When she is gone, we will inherit everything." It felt like an invisible hand had closed around my throat. Each word fell like a stone onto my chest. My son, the child I once carried in my arms, the boy I taught lessons about kindness and compassion. He was counting his mother's final breaths, waiting for the day he could divide the inheritance. The recording continued to crackle. Then I heard my daughter-in-law's voice. She giggled softly. She talked about renovating this house into a modern style. She talked about selling my antique vase collection. To them, Margaret and I were nothing but obstacles standing between them and wealth. I stopped the recorder. The silence in the house now felt even more terrifying than the voices I had just heard. My eyes drifted toward the family photo hanging on the wall. In that picture, Luke was still a young boy with an innocent smile. For a moment I wanted to smash the glass frame and erase every trace of him from my life. But I knew I had to stay calm. Blind anger would solve nothing. Margaret had prepared this for me. She wanted me to see Luke's true nature. She endured that humiliation so I could finally wake up. I stood up slowly and gathered every document back into the manila envelope. Then I locked it deep inside the safe. This was no longer about money. This was a war for Margaret's dignity, and it was the punishment a betrayer deserved. If you were the one who heard those words, what would you do? Leave a 2 in the comments if you believe someone like that must pay a heavy price. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3 days. Luke would come home in 3 days. He would walk through that door wearing a false face and offering empty condolences. He believed I was a blind old man controlled by love. He had no idea I had heard everything. I would wait for him, right here in this house. The very place where he had planned to strip us of everything. The script had already been written. And this time I was the one holding the controls. 3 days later, the roar of a luxury engine outside shattered the silence of the house. I stood behind the living room curtain. A shiny black SUV rolled into the driveway. Luke stepped out. He was wearing expensive sunglasses. His skin was deeply tanned after days under the California sun. His wife Tiffany stepped out behind him carrying several designer shopping bags. They looked like people returning from paradise, not people arriving for a mother's funeral. I opened the door. Luke removed his sunglasses and forced a sad expression onto his face. He stepped forward and hugged me. I could smell strong cologne and the salty scent of the ocean clinging to his shirt. His arms wrapped around me loosely. A hollow embrace. "Dad." "I'm sorry," he said in a strained voice. "Flights kept getting canceled. I tried everything to get here in time." I said nothing. Instead, I stepped back and looked at him carefully. The face was still my son's. But those eyes were completely unfamiliar. They were the eyes of a hunter measuring his prey. In that moment, I understood clearly. A stranger was standing in front of me wearing my son's face. Tiffany walked inside and kissed my cheek lightly. "We're so sorry about Mom," she said. Then her eyes began moving around the living room. They stopped on the Ming Dynasty vase sitting on the bookshelf. I noticed her gently nudging Luke with her elbow. They did not see the grief in my eyes. They only saw numbers. Luke sat down on the sofa. He did not even glance once at Margaret's photo on the memorial table. Instead, he started complaining about how exhausting the trip had been. He talked about how terrible the hotel in California was. I sat across from him quietly. I watched his hands. The same hands that had secretly drained our retirement account. "Dad," Luke finally said, getting straight to the point. "This house is probably too big for you now. I think we should consider selling it. I have some really good investment opportunities. It could guarantee you a luxurious life in the best retirement home." A cold current ran down my spine. He had not even been in the house for 10 minutes. His mother had barely been buried, and he was already calculating the price of the house. He spoke about a retirement home as if it were a gift. But I knew the truth. He wanted to remove me, to claim the final piece of the inheritance. I looked directly into his eyes. I wondered if he could hear the recorder screaming inside my mind. It won't be long now. When she's gone, we inherit everything. The sentence echoed over and over like a death sentence for the bond between father and son. I smiled, a bitter smile he could never understand. All right, Luke, I said calmly. I actually have something I want to show you too. A gift from your mother. Luke's eyes lit up instantly. He thought I was about to hand him the inheritance papers. He had no idea what I was really about to open was a door leading him straight to hell. Betrayal had reached its peak, and now it was time for his mask to fall completely. I stood up and walked toward the safe. My heart was pounding, but my hands were perfectly steady. The real battle was about to begin. I walked out of the study with the manila folder in my hands. Luke was sitting there calmly sipping tea with a look of quiet triumph. Tiffany was standing nearby using her phone to photograph Margaret's porcelain plate collection. Perhaps she was already sending the pictures to some appraiser. I placed the folder on the wooden table. The dry thud made both of them look up. Luke smiled broadly. Dad, you've already prepared the inheritance documents. That's very thoughtful of you. I'll handle all the legal paperwork. You just need to rest. I looked straight into his eyes. My voice was calm, almost frighteningly calm. You waited for your mother to lie cold and alone in the cemetery so you could take the money. Didn't you, Luke? The smile on his face froze. For a second he looked stunned, but then he quickly recovered his confident expression. Dad, what are you talking about? I'm still heartbroken about Mom. I'm only trying to take care of your future. I slid the documents toward him. These are copies of the bank statements. $47,000. You drained your mother's retirement account while she was lying in a hospital bed. You used it for vacations. You used it to buy the SUV parked outside. Luke's face changed from red to ghostly pale. Tiffany jumped to her feet. Dad, there must be some mistake. Luke only borrowed a little money for an investment. I did not even look at her. Instead, I pressed the play button on the recorder. The living room filled with the crackling sound of old tape. Then Luke's voice echoed clearly through the room. It won't be long now. When she's gone, we inherit everything. Luke's hand began to shake. The teacup slipped from his fingers and crashed onto the carpet. Tea splashed everywhere. The confident businessman vanished. What remained was a cowardly thief caught in the act. He stammered. That was when I was drunk. I didn't mean it like that. Dad, you have to understand the pressure I'm under. I slowly stood up. In that moment, I felt taller than I had in years, while he seemed to shrink deeper into Margaret's sofa. You have no pressure, I said quietly. You only have greed. You let your mother die with a broken heart. She knew everything. She cried because of you every night. And you... Tell me something, Luke. What exactly do you deserve in this life? Luke's expression suddenly changed. He stopped pleading. He stood up and glared at me with open hostility. So what, he snapped. You're old anyway. What do you need all that money for? Mom's gone. This house and that money will be mine sooner or later. What are you planning to take it with you into the grave? I looked at the man standing in front of me, a stranger wearing my son's face. There was no regret left in him. He was claiming ownership over his mother's death. Tiffany grabbed his arm. Luke, stop. Let's go. This old man has lost his mind. I smiled coldly. Leave, you're not leaving yet. I have a proposal for both of you. A proposal you cannot refuse, unless you want to spend the next 10 years in a state prison for financial exploitation of the elderly and fraud. Luke froze. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by pure fear. He knew I was not bluffing. He knew the investigator had gathered enough evidence. In this battle, I was not standing alone. Margaret was still standing behind me. Luke stood frozen in the middle of the living room. The aggression he had shown earlier had completely vanished. In its place was a pale face and trembling lips. He stared at the investigator's file as if it were a death sentence. I pulled out another sheet of paper, a legal agreement already prepared by my attorney. I slid it across the table toward him. You have two choices, Luke. First, you sign this confession stating that you stole and misappropriated the money. I will send it directly to the county police department. With $47,000 involved, you will have at least 10 years in prison to reflect on what filial loyalty means. Luke looked at me, his eyes filled with desperate theatrical pleading. Dad, I'm your only son. Are you really going to destroy my life? I did not move. My heart had turned to stone. The second option, I continued calmly, is that you sign this document renouncing your inheritance. You will receive $50,000 immediately, but in return, you disappear from my life, forever. No phone calls, no visits, and you will not even appear at my funeral one day. Luke looked down at the check for $50,000 lying on the table. I could see the conflict in his eyes, but it was not a struggle between love and greed. It was a calculation. Which number was more profitable? Tiffany elbowed him sharply in the shoulder. She whispered, but I could hear every word. Sign it, Luke. 50,000 is enough to pay those people back. So that was it. He was in debt. He had stolen his mother's money to save himself. But he did not have the courage to admit it. Instead, he allowed her to die with bitterness in her heart. Luke picked up the pen. His hand trembled violently. He did not look at me even once. He signed quickly, so quickly, the ink had not even finished drying. Then he grabbed the check like a starving animal. He did not ask how I would live alone. He did not ask whether I would be all right. His cowardice made me feel sick. For a moment I had hoped he would cry. I had hoped he would fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. But no. He only cared about the check. He and Tiffany quickly gathered their things. They rushed out of the house like people fleeing a crime scene. I stood in the doorway and watched the black SUV disappear down the road. That was the last time I ever saw my son's face. A fair exchange. I bought my peace with money, and I sold the pain called blood ties. The house suddenly felt enormous. But this time the silence was no longer heavy. Instead, it felt strangely light. Margaret had been right. You cannot keep cancer inside your body simply because it carries your name. I walked back inside and picked up Margaret's photo frame. It's done, Margaret, I whispered. But deep down I knew the story was not over yet. People who live by betrayal eventually learn that money is never enough to buy safety. Stay with me a little longer, because the son who betrayed me might not be finished yet. 3 months passed after the day I escorted my only son out of my life. I sat in the library while the late afternoon sunlight stretched across the wooden floor. My phone vibrated. It was an email from Alexander. The investigator had continued to monitor Luke at my request. I opened the attachment. The photos that appeared filled me with a strange mixture of sorrow and cold justice. Luke was in Phoenix, but not in the luxury villa he had always dreamed about. He was standing outside a cheap casino looking disheveled and exhausted. The $50,000 check I had given him had not changed his life. It had only awakened the gambling demon already living inside him. The money was gone. In the photos, Tiffany was no longer beside him. She had disappeared the moment the last dollar vanished into a slot machine. The partner who had shared his greed had been the first to abandon him. Luke was alone. Debt was piling up. In the background of several photos, I could see tattooed men watching him from a distance. Debt collectors. The kind who do not ask politely. I kept scrolling. There was a short video clip. Luke was trying desperately to call someone. His face looked hollow. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights and panic. The polished businessman I once knew had vanished. Now he looked like a ghost, waiting for one last chance to survive. Suddenly my phone rang. An unknown number from Arizona. I answered but said nothing. On the other end I heard heavy breathing. Then Luke's voice. It was no longer arrogant. It sounded like a wounded animal trapped in a corner. Dad, please help me. They're going to kill me. I only need 30,000 more. You have plenty of money. You can't just let your own son die. A wave of disgust rose inside me. Even now he still saw me as nothing more than an ATM. He did not ask about my health. He did not apologize for Margaret. He only talked about money. If you don't send it, Luke suddenly snarled, his voice turning aggressive. I'll go online. I'll tell everyone you're a cruel man who threw his son out right after his mother's funeral. I'll destroy your reputation in that little town of yours. I smiled softly. The smile of a man who was finally free. You forgot something, Luke. I said slowly. You signed a written confession of theft. Every piece of evidence showing you stole your mother's money is still locked in my safe. You're trying to blackmail the man holding the key that could send you to prison. Silence. On the other end of the line, only the sound of wind moved through the phone. Luke understood. He had lost. Completely. He had sold his soul to the devil, and now the devil had come to collect the debt. I ended the call. I felt no heartbreak, only peace. Luke had chosen his path. Now he would have to walk it to the end. The darkness created by his betrayal was finally closing around him. And as for me, I was preparing to fulfill the final wish Margaret had left behind. A new journey. One with no place for greed or betrayal. 2 weeks after the call from Phoenix, I was standing in the garden Margaret had loved so much. The roses she planted had begun to wither. I was trimming the branches when an old taxi pulled up outside the gate. Luke stepped out. He had grown so thin I almost did not recognize him. The designer clothes he once wore proudly were now wrinkled and dirty. Tiffany was nowhere beside him. Only desperation had come with him. He stood in front of me. There was no fake hug this time. No apology. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "Dad, I need money. Right now. Those guys are already at the edge of town. If I don't pay them, they'll kill me." I continued trimming the roses without looking at him. His presence only polluted the quiet peace of the garden. Luke shouted, "Are you even listening to me? You're really going to let your own son get killed? You're a cold-hearted man." Then he pulled out a stack of photos. They were pictures of Margaret and me during the days when she was at her weakest. He raised his phone. "I'll post all of this online. I'll tell the world you let Mom die in pain without helping her. I'll say you abused her. This town will turn against you. You won't be able to show your face here ever again." I stopped trimming the roses. Slowly, I turned and looked straight at him. "You think you still have power, Luke? You're trying to bury the truth about the $47,000 you stole with lies. You don't have proof." Luke laughed wildly. "I signed away my inheritance, not my freedom." I slowly took my phone out of my pocket and pressed a number I had already saved. "You forgot something, Luke," I said calmly. "Detective Alexander didn't just take photographs. He also gathered every record of your gambling debts. And the police are waiting for my signal to issue an arrest for fraud and blackmail." Luke's face twisted with fear. He lunged forward trying to grab my phone, but I stepped back. 2 men in plain clothes walked out from behind the old oak tree. Local police. They had been there since the moment Luke stepped through the gate. "We heard everything, Luke," one officer said. "Extortion and threatening an elderly person are criminal offenses." Luke collapsed onto the grass. He began crying, begging, pleading. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. I was forced into this. Don't let them take me to prison." I looked at my son one final time. This time I did not see a child. I saw a criminal trying to escape responsibility. I turned and walked back toward the house. I had nothing left to say to him. My heart had closed the moment I heard that recording. Behind me, the sound of handcuffs clicked together. That was the final sound of our blood tie breaking. Luke was taken away while neighbors gathered outside the gate whispering and watching. The truth about the devoted son had been exposed. He would not be able to blackmail anyone again. The punishment of the law had only just begun. But the greatest sentence he would carry was the contempt of the entire community and the permanent silence of the father he betrayed. The house returned to its natural quiet. But it was not the silence of death. It was the peace that comes after a violent storm. Luke had paid the price. He was arrested right in my yard for theft and extortion. The community turned its back on him. People who live by betrayal eventually get consumed by their own greed. I sat down at Margaret's desk. From the drawer I took out the final letter she had written, the one I had not been strong enough to finish reading on the day of her funeral. Her handwriting still seemed to carry her warmth. "My love, do not let his darkness extinguish our light. Live, my love, and be happy." My tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink. Margaret had forgiven me for not protecting her sooner. She wanted me to release the burden I had been carrying. So I chose to fulfill her final wish in the most complete way I could. All the inheritance and property Luke had once been so desperate to claim were redirected to another purpose. I used it to establish a cancer research foundation in Margaret's name. Because family is not only DNA. Family is love, loyalty, and respect. Sometimes letting go of toxic people, even those bound to you by blood, is not abandoning love. It is protecting it. I stood by the window and looked out at the roses in the garden. They were beginning to bloom again. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel alone. I felt Margaret beside me. Justice had been done. Not through hatred, but through the resolve of a man who finally chose to defend what was right. Perhaps my story is a warning. Do not let kindness be exploited, and never trade your honor for dirty money. If you have stayed with me until this moment, let me ask you for one small thing. Subscribe. Many people watch these stories but never do that. It costs you nothing, but it helps you stay updated with the next stories we share. Thank you for walking with me through the darkest chapters of my life. Cherish the people who truly love you. Goodbye for now, and I will see you again in the next story on Dad's Real Life Revenge. I closed the notebook. Golden evening sunlight filled the room, and a new chapter of my life quietly began in peace and in the light of true love.